like elementary school, probably even younger, you watch a lot of like cartoons like Scooby-Doo, whatever it may be. And, you hear of like sinkholes and quicksand and tornadoes and things like that, where as a little kid, you think to yourself, this is going to be a really big problem in my life. I better be prepared.
Yeah.
I'm almost 27 now. It has yet to become an issue, any of those things for me.
Uh-huh.
But I know that that's not the case for you. Apparently, you have nature has tried to kill you in very many ways. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I've had a couple of those. Actually, all of those that you mentioned. It's kind of scary. Maybe not the quicksand. I didn't have the quicksand. Yeah. Well, when we lived in Texas, yes, we had a tornado come through town and take the whole town in Wichita Falls. Yes, so we had that. Let's see, my house burned down. That was in Harrisburg. That was bad. Had some pretty significant, car accidents with my family and independently and that kind of thing that set me back a while. Yeah, did have a sinkhole. Yes, my car was in a sinkhole.
Were you in the car?
No,
Oh,
thank goodness. Yeah. No, I had just parked and walked into a store, and my daughter went back to put some bags in it. I actually was picking her up. I actually had worked during the day. She was there with her cousins doing some back to school shopping and everything else. And she went back to the car and she calls me and tells me the car's gone. I'm like, what? I'm like, somebody steal our car? No. There's a really big hole and the car's in it. I'm like, just my car? And she's like, no, 6 cars. 6 cars. I was like, oh. She's like, yeah, but yours is the worst. I'm like, oh, awesome.
You've entered the smoke-filled room, where we cut through the haze of Harrisburg politics and get to examine the laws and lawmakers that really drive the discussion.
Representative Sheryl Delozier, thank you so much for joining us today. You represent the 88th Legislative District, which is Cumberland County, more specifically, pretty much the Mechanicsburg area. Tell me about your district. Who are your constituents?
Absolutely. The 88th district is pretty cool in the sense that it is a suburban district. So it has the activity and the busy growth that we've seen over the last 25 years. And it has certainly changed and evolved. But right now, the Mechanicsburg, you referred to it as Mechanicsburg, which absolutely is a core part of it. The Mechanicsburg mailing address is probably, I think, almost sometimes I feel bigger than the state itself. It encompasses close to 6 municipalities. So when someone says they're from Mechanicsburg, you do kind of have to say the borough, and they're like, no, not the borough. And it's like, it could be Silver Spring, or it could be Hampden, it could be Lower Allen, it could be Shiremanstown, or the borough itself. So the 88th district itself right now encompasses all of Hampden Township, most of Lower Allen Township. It has a small piece that's in the 87th. And then it has the 3 boroughs of New Cumberland, Mechanicsburg, and Shiremanstown.
Gotcha. What are your constituents like? What's the big industry there?
The big industry there in many cases is government. Certainly with the state, we have a lot of state employees and a lot of state retirees. And we have a lot of teachers, certainly, in our area, but we also have military bases surrounding the area. So we have in Hampden, we have the Mechanicsburg Depot, and right outside of my district, across that creek just a bit, is the New Cumberland base. So there's a lot of military in our neck of the woods and a lot of state workers and federal workers, because we obviously have the federal building downtown.
What's the big issues that you see facing them?
Many times it's the operation of government. A lot of people in our area are absolutely focused on the involvement of how government operates, because so many of them have a tie to it in some way or another. Whether they're a lobbyist, whether they're a state employee, whether they are just an employee in one of the state agencies that work on a day-to-day basis to get our our licenses procured, or our DHS or our education departments. There's so many of our state employees that work to make sure that government operates in a good way. So when the budget doesn't get done on time, or when something blows up in Harrisburg, our constituency in the 88th district it's very real to them, because it either directly affects them in the sense that they're involved in the issue, and or their media market covers it very, very heavily. So those are some of our largest entities that we hear from on a regular basis through emails and social media and that type of thing. And there's many other, we have a lot of builders out there. We have construction. We're not an area that has oil and gas, or when those issues come up, we have a very industrious engineering entrepreneurs that are out there that have their own companies that do work with oil and gas. So we hear from them when it comes to some of the issues that affect the back side of oil and gas procurement and everything else, that they have to work with contracts and that type of thing. So those are the folks that I hear from in that particular industry. But certainly we have many of the other industries that are out there. We have Giant. We have a lot of our Kessler's was right there in Lemoyne. Used to be in the 88th, but it's certainly there on the West Shore. Manufacturing. We have a Pepsi plant. We have a Coke plant. So we have a lot of different diversity out there, the types of jobs. But with our boroughs, it's the small mom and pops. Our boroughs it's awesome to go down Main Street in Mechanicsburg and see.
It's a lot.
It is, and see those small stores that people have decided that they have something that they can provide to the community, and they've taken that big plunge to open a store. And that's one of the cool things with the chambers that we have. We have 3 that kind of cover our area between Mechanicsburg Chamber and our West Shore Chamber, and then Harrisburg Regional Chamber. And when they have openings, it's exciting to see how somebody took their entrepreneurial thought and made it real and made it happen. And with small boroughs and everything, you see that more and more, because there's small shops that open up and really just try to make a difference with the thing that they think that somebody needs, whether it's to be open up to do hair, to cut hair, or tattoo parlor, or we decided that we needed a candy store, or we need an ice cream store. And those are the smaller businesses that you see within.
A lot of good restaurants too.
A lot of good restaurants. And I will say, Hamden's new to me. Hamden in this last redistricting came. So I ended up with the whole Carlisle Pike just about, which was wow. Talk about all types of businesses that are out there. That was pretty amazing to be able to get to know that area a lot better. But the ability for us, and it keeps growing. We have Sheetz opened 2 new stores just in Lower Allen in the last month. So that was, we went to both of those openings. One's 2 doors down from my district office, so my staff loves that. They thought that was great.
Those 2 for $1 hot dogs. You can't beat it.
You can't beat it. You can't beat it. And going in and getting some drinks and everything else. So Sheetz absolutely is building and expanding, which is wonderful to see in our area.
Did you grow up there?
I did not. I traveled a lot, or I moved around a lot as a kid, but I went to high school down in Westchester.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where were you born?
I was born in Mount Vernon, New York.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's the coolest place you lived?
Oh, they all had their good things, in the sense. I mean, I was a kid, so I kind of, had no choice. I was like, oh, where are we going? Oh, okay. But I lived in Milwaukee, born in Mount Vernon, New York, and then came back to New York and lived in Peekskill, New York for a number of years. And then we moved down to Texas for a number of years. And then after that, we came to Westchester. So that's where I went to high school. So I did my 4 years there and then went to college.
Why did you decide to settle in Pennsylvania then?
I love Pennsylvania. I truly think it's a pretty amazing state. People talk about the diversity of it. And I think that's one of the biggest selling points of it, because you have the big metropolitan areas, in the big cities. You have wonderful farmland that you drive through and you see, whether it's just in Lancaster or somewhere else, in the northern tier that they have. You have a forest, up on the New York border. You have Lake Erie that sits there and is gorgeous, freezing, but gorgeous, I used to tease Kurt Sonny as to, count the amount of inches of snow in October. Kind of thing. I could never live there, but it's beautiful, So there's so many diverse areas. And I think central Pennsylvania, where I've lived for the last, 35 years of my life and been proud to represent, has a lot of that diversity because we're so close. We can get to Baltimore. We can get to D.C. in 2 hours. We can get to Philadelphia in 2 hours. We can get to Pittsburgh in 4. All of these areas that we can get to, but yet we're a suburban district outside of the capital. And so I think that Central Pennsylvania has a lot to offer anybody. And hey, Cumberland County, it's the fastest growing county in our state.
Really? Okay.
It is. Well, Pike County might have edged us a little bit because those New Yorkers keep moving into Pike County. But
I know you are one of them, but I can't stand
no, it's
them.
okay. It's okay. I gave up my identity in New York a long time ago, but no, they absolutely Pike County but Cumberland County has grown by leaps and bounds, and I mean actually it could be its own entire Senate seat now, which in and of itself it's not. It's broken up a little bit, but 260,000 people in Cumberland County, and you go back a couple years and it's nowhere close to that.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen a lot of development, good and bad, but we also are very proud to have in Cumberland County so much preserved farmland because we recognize how important that is as well. So,
What did your parents do?
My parents, my dad was an electrical engineer, and he worked in sales and would bring home every switch known imaginable to man. And my sister and I would open every suitcase and play with all the switches. We thought that was pretty cool. We had no idea what my dad did at the time, but we thought the switches were pretty cool. My mom stayed home with us, and then when we were in middle school, she went to go work for our local township, and she became the township secretary and worked with the board there with the township, and worked there for many years.
Was that your introduction into politics?
It's funny. I think about that now, and no, it wasn't necessarily, but because she was staff there and she did her job and kind of came home, so she wasn't involved necessarily in the political side of it. Mm-hmm. But I would have to say, my dad was always talking politics. And he was somebody that I looked up to in a lot of ways, and would sit there and listen to a lot of his conversations about federal government. And he took me to see, I'll never forget, he took me when I was a little kid to go see Ronald Reagan. He was speaking in Valley Forge. And so he, scooped us both up, and he's like, come on, we're going to see the president. And I remember him standing me on a wall, like a half wall, so I could see over all the adults. And we sat there and listened to him speak. And my dad was just so enamored with the fact that he loved Ronald Reagan, but I thought it was cool that we were seeing a president, and he was in our community and everything else. So after that, I did a lot of internships at the courthouse, and that kind of drove me into the importance of government and public policy. And but I am the oddity in my family.
What do you think you got from your dad in terms of the way you view politics?
Well, I think that I got the point of view that there are different points of view. And because many times while he agreed, and he was a staunch Republican, and I have to laugh because when we lived in Texas at the time, Texas was very Democratic. And both of my parents actually switched to be Democrats because there was never anybody on the Republican ballot. So the decisions were all made on that side of the ballot. And I don't think my dad really liked that very much. So he switched back to being a Republican, and so did my mom. But they wanted to be active in the process. And they were the ones that, hammered into my head that every election is important, and you need to vote. You're 18, you vote, period. My dad was the one that he would have me fill out my absentee ballot for college. When I was in college all 4 years, I voted all 4 years I was in college because he was the impetus that said, here, we have to fill this out so you can get a ballot on campus. And I remember my college roommates would be like, what are you doing? When I'd get it, they were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm voting. And they're like, for what? I'm like, I'm voting. It's my ballot. I'm voting, and they were push pins at the time. You had to push in and vote. And they just never quite understood that. But I always thought it was the coolest thing that my dad made sure that I always got that ballot to make sure that I was able to have my voice counted. And he always said, your voice is important. You need to cast your vote and have your voice heard. And he was always the one that said, if you don't vote, don't complain. Yeah. That's clean.
I know what you're
that's
saying.
cleaned up from what he would say. But yeah, so he drove that home pretty hard.
How do your political views? Where do you think is the biggest headbutting between you and your father in terms of political views?
Actually, we agreed a lot. We did. He was I would say he probably was much more, he would be, right now, he'd be much more in line with the fiscal, very right conservative. And I am as well. Like fiscally, I'm very conservative, and I agree wholeheartedly with him on that. But for as conservative as my dad was, it always resonated with me that he was also very strong in his belief that everybody needs to live their life that makes them happy. And so I do believe he never got necessarily, he's been gone a number of years now, but he's been gone almost 14 years. But so there's a lot of changes that have happened since then socially, understanding gay rights, understanding gay marriage, understanding, a lot of those issues that have come up and been much more in the political forefront that he never really had a stance on per se, but knowing him, his opinion would very much be similar to mine in the sense of let everybody live their life to be happy. You don't need to put your views on someone else, but you have every right to live your life how you choose to live your life.
Very small government, even when it's not convenient for you.
Have the government stay out of your business. Let them live their lives. We don't need to regulate or have an opinion, legislatively or regulatorily, that kind of thing. So that was his very much. So I believe he would be along those lines at this point, and that's where we would definitely agree.
How has your district changed? So, to preface, you just announced you were elected in 2008. So 18 years of service, and you just recently announced that you will not be seeking re-election. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'll ever forgive you.
Sorry.
How has your district changed in those 18 years?
Oh, it has. I believe that my predecessor, Representative Naylor, would probably not recognize the district. When he left, he lived in Mechanicsburg Borough, and he's still happily living in Florida, him and his wife. And but it was a 60-40 district at the time, so the plurality has changed tremendously. And now it is absolutely a purple district, and it's all but 50-50. In viewpoint, there's independents registered as well. But when you take a look at the makeup of the district, it's changed. There was 2 redistrictings that happened, and since I was there, and each time it changed pretty significantly. I'm still obviously a suburban West Shore district, but the makeup, the actual municipalities have evolved. And so the West Shore has certainly changed in its voting, Republican and Democrat and who's registered to vote. We've certainly had that city bleed, some folks coming out of the city that are registered Democrats and they want to live on the West Shore. So that registration comes with them, obviously. So some of the issues have changed as well, like what, from being farther right in viewpoints, it's now much more, as I mentioned, the fiscally conservative and socially moderate. And that's what makes up the district now. Our cost of living or our average, income has changed significantly. Our obviously everywhere our prices of houses has increased. We've built out in the area at this point. At the time when I first started, I had Monroe Township was part of the 88th district. And I used to joke because it was literally half of the land mass of the district, but there was only 5,500 people on it. And so
just for comparison, like how big is usually a house district?
Oh, well.
In terms of population.
Okay. Well, the house districts are all, on average, 65,000. Okay. But if you ask Marty Kauser up in the northern tier, he has like 3 counties in his district to make up that 65,000 people. I have this tiny little sliver on the West Shore that makes up this, because we're very densely populated. Yeah. We don't have we don't have any farms. We don't have that wild, or widespread land that Marty would have in the northern tier. So actually, when one of the redistricting maps came out, I'll always remember my mom called, and I guess she was on the line, and she was taking a look at the districts, and how all of our numbers are placed, in the district and everything else. And she calls me, and she's like, Sheryl, there's a problem with the map that's online. And I'm like, why? And she goes, well, your number's there, but your district isn't there. And I'm like, really? And I said, and all of a sudden, so I pulled it up while I was talking to her, and I'm like, yeah, Mom. I said, it's there. And she's like, no, I can see the 88. She goes, I said, Mom, I said, what she's looking at is like the bigger districts surrounding me. And what she didn't realize was because I'm so, our area is so densely populated, the land mass was underneath the number.
Gotcha.
And so she just didn't recognize that because she's looking at other districts that just encompass so much more land than the 88th district. And we've gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's easy to travel, but pretty densely populated.
Did you prefer, now that you're not running for re-election, might be able to ask you this. Do you prefer that bigger, more, I guess, by comparison, rural district compared to what it is now where it's very compact?
I would say that, when you're trying to get from event to event to event, which we have to do on a number of occasions, even in the evenings or on the weekends, when we're trying to get to events, it's nice to have a really compact district so you can get there quicker. But along with compact comes traffic, and more congestion and everything else. So I've heard some constituents not liking that too much. So when you're in a hurry, you're kind of like, that might be an impediment. But when you had the more broad district, when I did have Monroe, I had farms. So I had much more agriculture, whereas I don't have that right now. And agriculture is our leading industry. So I really loved having a piece of that within the 88th district, which we do not have any longer. We have one farm out in Hamden, small farm out there, but the big sprawling, dairy farms that we used to have in Monroe Township, we don't have that in the 88th any longer. So with the more suburban or more rural, as you mentioned, come different issues. And so I did enjoy having some agriculture to be tuned in to that leading industry we have in our state.
Outside of your district, how do you think state government and politics in general has changed over the past 18 years?
Oh, how long do we have?
As long as you want.
Oh, don't tell me that. No, it has changed. It absolutely has changed. The tone of politics has changed significantly.
So we'll do this. What do you think is the biggest positive change, and what do you think is the biggest negative change?
I would say the biggest negative change is social media. And I joked that I would outlaw it if I could. And I'd get a lot of support to do it. And the reason I say that is simply because social media has phenomenal attributes. To be able to get your message out there, to get, even having podcasts, which are awesome tools to be used in order to get a message out and get a conversation out there. But it has been weaponized to the point where we have, the keyboard warriors and the ability where you can type anything about anyone. And because they see it on the screen, it's factual. They can call you any name in the book. They are very, very brave, when they're not face to face. So I think that personal connection has been lost in many ways. Like I said, great tools to be able to get messaging out there. Bad tool for when it's weaponized, to be able to be used in a way that, we've seen it in the schools, and that's not politics necessarily. But I could not imagine being a student today and not being able to get away from that constant barrage. If you're being bullied or if you're being tormented, I couldn't imagine what that must be for a student. That also happens in politics. That constant barrage of negativity. And you can let it roll off your back. You can't be in politics and not let things roll off your back and just ignore it to a point. Sometimes it's pretty hard to ignore. When you're, they say don't read the Facebook page, don't read the Twitter, don't read the, whatever it is. Sometimes that's pretty hard to do when especially when it's wrong and you're like, no, that's not what happened. Like, this is what happened or why I did X, those types of things. So then you feel defensive as to having to explain. So I would say that absolutely. I think that has changed the tone of politics because, somebody asked me just recently about bipartisanship. And that's something that has been very, very important to me throughout my career is you don't get anything done in the far right and the far left. It's done in the middle. It's done with consensus. It's done with compromise. And from both sides of the aisle. That being said, somebody asked me, because, when you read the newspapers and you see the media, you see the headlines. And, the Republicans did this and the Democrats did this. You don't see a headline saying the Republicans and Democrats did this. Because that doesn't sell anything. It's not clickbait. It's not, all the things that they want, to happen now. So somebody asked me just recently, she goes, do you guys really not get along as well, as much as you see on the news? And I kind of laughed and I said, no. I said, actually, when we're on the floor, there's a lot of camaraderie.
Do you think it's less now than what it was when you first started?
I do believe that, yes. Because I think that there is, when I first started, we would have a dinner with Republicans and Democrats. That doesn't happen as much anymore. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but there would be an actual push to bring together different Republicans and Democrats, and when you're out and you're having, a hamburger with somebody, you get to know them. You get to know that they have 3 kids. You get to know that their daughter loves softball, and you get to know that their son won the math contest, in his middle school, and you get to know that their wife is a nurse and works in the emergency. You get to know those things, and that makes them a person versus just someone that sits across the aisle, or even in your own, caucus. That's when you get to know some folks. You get to have those conversations and they get to learn about you. And that doesn't happen near as much. And you see these flamethrowers come through social media and it makes you very angry. And I think that anger simmers much larger than it did many, many years ago when you actually had conversations face to face rather than lobbing those, grenades to try to make a headline or make a political point through social media.
Before we talk about the biggest positive change in politics, do you think that with the invention of social media and its ability to connect people, do you think that it is harder or easier now than when it was when you first came in to actually be connected in a sense of community with your constituents and actually get a feel of what's going on?
I would think I would be a very bad state representative if I counted on social media to connect me to my constituents. Social media doesn't connect me to my constituents, and I don't think anybody who serves their constituency should believe that because you send out a Facebook post, you're connecting. You're connecting when you go to that Eagle Scout and you present a citation which seems pro forma and seems like, they're just cutting ribbons and giving citations. But when you're there, you're talking to the grandma. You're talking to the scout. You're showing them that government shows up for you. You're showing the parents that you're there for a good reason. You're there for a child that should be the headline on the newspaper, but isn't. That's where you connect to your constituents. You connect to your constituents when you're at all the festivals in the summer. You connect with your constituents when you go to all those fire dinners that take forever and are very long. And I tease them all the time as to, can we shorten this up just a little bit?
The food is great, though.
Oh, hey, you always got to do that, yes. But, so I give them a hard time about, okay, guys, are we done? Because they only have one fire dinner. I have 12. So, but they don't realize that. But that's where you connect with your constituency. You don't connect by sending out a Facebook post. You inform and say, hey, I'm having this event. You advertise, you educate maybe, but you don't connect through social media. You connect through the personal skills of being and showing up, because that's the one thing that I've always tried. And I'm proud to say that a lot of constituents say, Sheryl, you're always there. I always see you at all of these events. That's what's important, because they remember that. They remember that you showed up even when you didn't have to show up. So I wholeheartedly believe that, yes, we have our tools and we now can use podcasts and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all of those things. And they're very useful tools to use. But we ourselves have to get out there to do the connecting, door to door. That's the political side of things and everything else as well. But, getting out and talking to people at their doors, showing up. I still have people that say, oh, I remember you came to my door. And I don't have that area anymore. So it was a while back that I showed up but they remember that. They remember that you took the time to make that connection. And I will have to say, emails come in all the time. And I respond to every email. And I don't respond in a format. I respond unless it's a form letter, then everybody gets the same form letter back, which we get those on a regular basis. But if somebody emails in about a concern, I try very, very hard to gather the information that we need, but make sure we're answering the question and make sure that they feel heard, because that's what our constituents want. Even through an email, you can get that point across that you are listening to them. You may not have the answer that they want, which does happen.
Typically the case,
exactly. And sometimes, they're like, well, you didn't give, you didn't say. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer that you want, or I can't help you. But sometimes they want a federal issue. And so then you can, be that facilitator to hook them up with your congressman or, any of the 2 U.S. senators. But so those emails are also important, and that is electronic, but they can read through that. But sometimes, in all honesty, I just pick up the phone. I know it's antiquated. What phone? We pick up a phone, we have a conversation. My daughter, I don't think she realizes that the phone she has in her hand actually dials because everything is done. Yeah. And I said one time she had to call something about her she graduated from college this last year, and I said, well, you have to call, one of the offices for her school. And she looked at me horrified, So I understand that the phone seems like an antiquated tool, but I will say this. If someone calls in my office and I pick up the phone and they start talking about her, she's going to do this and she's going to do that, meaning me, I let them go for a little while. And then finally I'm like, I'm Sheryl. And not only are they caught off guard, their tone changes significantly, yes. So, but if you pick up the phone and have that conversation with people, look, I was on the phone through COVID. They were 14-hour days in the office, calling people back, addressing issues. Every night, literally almost every night from 5 to 8, I called people back, call after call after call, who were concerned about things, who couldn't get services, who were looking for help. And during the day, certainly people called in as well. But I was on the phone, and that really does resonate with people. Oh, thank you for calling me back. Thank you for taking time to talk to me about this, because sometimes it doesn't get through on an email, and sometimes the tone is lost. Yeah. So let's have a phone conversation about it, and it does resonate with people.
So what do you think, going back a little bit, what do you think is the biggest positive change in politics or state government since you started?
I would say awareness, involvement. I think that many more people are aware of the importance of elections. It kind of goes both ways, because they're more aware and they're running. They're upset about how things are going, and so they turn their back on it in some ways, like that they're frustrated when they see all of the arguing and all of the finger pointing and that kind of thing. They want a government that works, but I do believe that over the years I have seen much more engagement with people that listen to the TV. Now, do they just listen to their side of the TV? Sometimes, are you listening to Fox? Are you listening to CNN? Are you watching The View? Are you watching, depending on who it is. But, if I talk to your typical high school student, no, they're not going to know who their state representative is. Are they going to know who is running for election that time? Or are they, they may not be as well, but but the 20-year-olds have gotten engaged, I believe. I have 2 of them myself. Now, they grew up in this life. So, I always do kind of joke about the fact that, the plumber's kid knows what the, elbow pipe is, and the elected representative's child knows that there's 2 elections every year and you show up, hell or high water.
Yeah.
You are at that election poll, whether it's through, mailing in your ballot or showing up. Well, I usually had them working the polls, so, they had no choice in the matter. But so my kids are very in tune with that, right? But because of that, I do believe that the younger generation has grown up much more aware. And as much as we said it was probably a bad thing, a lot of that is from social media because they're attached to it. They are glued to that. So that goes back to the kind of, you can use it for information and education, but hopefully they take the time to go investigate on their own. Whenever the students come in, a lot of times that's one of the things I drive home again and again and again is it's fine to listen to a group. Whether it's, a teacher's organization, a gun group, pick an issue, that you agree with them philosophically. That's fine to listen to what it is that they're saying and agree with it, but know why you agree with it. And that's what I've tried to hammer home, because don't just take their word for it. Because when students have come into my office, I'm usually the devil's advocate, and I ask them all kinds of questions. And I don't think they most of the time they don't expect that. But I'm like, well, why do you support this? And they just kind of look at me and they're looking at their papers, like what the talking points are. It's like, well, that question's not on here. How do I answer that? And I'll ask them, well, where do you think we should take the money from? Because they're usually advocating for more dollars for whatever. I'm like, well, where do you think we should take the money from? Should we take it from? Yeah. So they're little deer in headlights sometimes when I start asking questions. But I just try to stress to them, it's like, I appreciate that you support getting more funding for Shippensburg or Penn State or our state schools, because that's a lot of times what the college students are in for. But all I'm saying is come in recognizing that the money's got to come from somewhere. So I love seeing those 20-year-olds coming in. I love having a conversation with them. When they want to have a meeting, absolutely, let's have a meeting. Let's sit down and talk. The more we can engage them, the better. We don't have to agree. I don't mind that, if they feel, something that I don't feel, or that my district I cannot, do because of my district. But that dialogue, I think, sometimes we've lost a little bit of that. So anytime we can encourage that, I think that's a good thing. But I do believe that more involvement, more people willing to voice their opinion, and we just need to remember that we can all voice our opinions respectfully.
So before we start reflecting on your previous 18 years of work, I want to know, what do you have going on right now? What is the stuff you're currently working on?
Sure. We have right now in the House, I'm working with Representative Krajewski on a couple child welfare bills. I was a chairman of Children and Youth for a term. And the ability for us to work within our system that works with foster children, that's something that I feel very, very strongly about. It's something that is very important to me. 18 years old, they have a cliff. And if they're in a situation, where the individuals don't keep them around 18 up, we no longer get your support for you, you're on your own. That 18-year-old is not, I know it's an adult in the eyes of the law, but how many 18-year-olds do you know that are actually adults?
Not me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Especially, looking around and seeing the different folks and everything else. And that cliff is a problem. And we have a bill out there about service dollars, SSI dollars, and death benefits, and those types of things that when someone does not have their parents, and they are in the foster care system for whatever reason, they are receiving dollars for certain, like I said, SSI is just one of them. And those dollars, in our opinion, should not be going into the county coffers. They should be going for that child to use in the future. Whether it could even be for the use, of going on a field trip, those dollars should be used for that child. And so we're working on some of the details with that as well. But we also have parental rights bill that we're looking at, where certain children are still in the foster care system. They have not been adopted. They are not settled necessarily, and the parents may have lost their right to the child. For whatever reason, not abuse, that is not one of the reasons, but that they have been denied that. Well, maybe the parent has gotten their life together, and but if that child, this parent is still is willing and able, because they've been able to straighten themselves out, and this child is still in the foster care system, why not try to allow for that second chance between that? Because the best place for someone is with family if it is in the best interest of that child. And so we're working on those two things. I have two bills dealing with an issue that I've dealt with my entire career, victims' rights and PFAs, protection from abuse orders. One redefining stalking under a protection from abuse order, to give police some tools to be able to recognize that stalking is a form of abuse and emotional, that type of terror that someone has when someone is being stalked. And the second bill that I'm working on is that bill, actually my stalking bill, actually got out of committee, and we're waiting for a floor vote, hopefully, for that. The other bill is one that deals with individuals who ignore the law, and they have a PFA against them, that they are not to contact an individual because of abuse. They ignore that. At this point in time, they can ignore it again and again and again and again, and they pay their $300 fine and they keep going.
That's it?
That's it. So we were looking at the issue for the victim's point of view, saying, no, that's not it. You totally ignore the court. It is a civil side. It's not a criminal side. It is a civil penalty. But you ignore the court again and again, just write that check for $300 and think you're going to just, keep on going. One particular instance, that person would write the check and they'd be sitting outside the individual's home, the victim's home, terrorizing them again. And they get another slap on the wrist and another $300, So we were looking at it from the perspective of similar to escalating, like a DUI, as time 1, time 2, time 3, and being able to recognize that not only should the financial penalty go up, but there should be the ability to say, the first time, you have the financial penalty. The second time, financial penalty and a couple days in jail. You know what the rules are. You know what you're not supposed to be doing. You're ignoring it and totally ignoring the court's order. There needs to be a recognition that this can't continue.
Why is that not already a thing?
Good question.
What do you think?
Sometimes it really just takes, unfortunately, it takes
a tragedy.
Our system is very reactive. I have tried very hard with victims' issues and victims' rights throughout my career to be proactive, to think about how can I make sure that this victim, if there was one in the past, that there's not one in the future, and be more proactive. But unfortunately, our system is not something that works quickly, proactively. Unfortunately, we tend to be pretty reactive.
If you had a magic wand and you could immediately take any of the bills that you've introduced over the past 18 years that you've been here that were not yet signed into law.
Oh, we're not signed into law.
Which one would you sign into law?
Marcy's Law.
What is
Marcy's Law was my constitutional change. That was one, and it wasn't signed into law. I'm threading the needle on that signing into law part, because a constitutional change is not signed by the governor. We worked very hard. Marcy's Law was something that in other states has passed and without issue. And we are one of very few states that do not have the rights of the victim enshrined in our Constitution. We have the rights of the defendant, as we should. They should have all the rights that they are entitled to have a fair trial and to be appropriately represented. But many times our system looks at victims as a piece of evidence and not as the human and the victim that they are, that the reason the case is moving forward is because something happened to them through no fault of their own. So with Marcy's Law, we were able to, with a constitutional change, it's very hard, very long process.
What is that process?
It has to pass the same exact legislation, verbiage-wise, has to pass two separate sessions. And basically, I understand why. I mean, because it's passed by one legislature, and then you have an election, so things turn over, people retire, new members come in, and then you have to make that same argument about that piece of legislation to the new body in the new session. So that I understand that you get 2 times where you have to make your argument and get it passed, and it has to pass both the House and the Senate. Once it is passed those 2 bodies, then it basically sits and it goes to the Department of State, who writes a question because it has to go on the ballot. So it goes on the ballot for all of Pennsylvania's voters to have their voice heard at the ballot box, and then they have this question on the ballot. So we educate about that. There's this question on the ballot for victims' rights. So I would very much, that's the one that I would absolutely, because we got it all the way through. We got it through 2 sessions. We got it on the ballot on the question, or the ballot, got the question on the ballot. Over 70% of Pennsylvanians voted to have that enshrined in the Pennsylvania Constitution. Some groups, 2 groups in particular, took the ballot question to court.
Okay.
And did not like how it was phrased. And our sitting Supreme Court, the arguments were in front of the Supreme Court on how the question was asked. Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And unfortunately, the majority of the court decided that the question should have been asked wrong and struck it down. So over 70% of voters voted to have the victim's voice heard within our state constitution. I'm still very proud of all the work that we did do with that, primarily because it gave a lot of notice to victims' issues on many different levels. It also brought to attention that we had some gaps in Pennsylvania law. Once that was struck down, after all those years of working on that, I pulled certain pieces of that bill out and have been able to get some of those passed in smaller pieces as legislation, not to the Constitution, but at least giving victims standing in court hearings, giving them acknowledgement of being informed. The whole reason that Marcy's Law started was because Marcy was out in California, and she was murdered by her boyfriend, who she had a PFA against and had been splitting up from. And he came and killed her. They know he killed her. Like, there was evidence there and everything else. He hadn't had a trial, so obviously innocent until proven guilty, but they arrested him. They charged him with her murder. Then he was released. But the family was not informed. So the mother and the brother had just come from Marcy's funeral. They're at a grocery store. They're walking down the aisle, and who's walking towards them? The defendant. They were never informed as to the fact that the person they just had buried their daughter and sister, and the person who did the crime was walking towards them in the grocery store. That brother decided then and there that he wasn't going to let that happen to any other family. So the rights of the victim's family and the voice of that victim in the process became his goal, and he was able to advocate for that in many different states. He was lucky enough to be well off, so he was able to financially support that endeavor and be able to do that in any number of states. Different versions, but all with the same basis of allowing for those victims' rights to be enshrined in state constitutions.
So you've had, over your 18 years of service, 15 laws signed in, or 15 bills signed into law?
17, actually.
17,
Yes,
sorry.
come on.
I must have counted wrong.
That's
And I
fine.
know sometimes it can be weird where it's your original verbiage,
Yes,
but it's
yes,
put
there
into
is
another.
some. Correct.
So,
Yeah, that is
forgive
true.
me.
No,
But
it's fine. I'm
what,
just
out of
teasing.
those 17, which one are you most proud of?
I guess I would have to say clean slate. Clean slate, and the reason is because clean slate has helped the most people in the long run, and I think it will continue to do that. We, as a state, we were the first state. It was the bill that was the first in the nation
Really?
to give a second chance to individuals who have straightened out, paid their price to the society, whatever it may have been, if they had any time to be served or restitution and court fees and fines and taking care of all of that. And they haven't had any police interaction over, depending on the offense, 7 to 10 years. It's proven across our nation that if someone is have served time and come out and not committed another crime within 4 years, that they're no more likely to commit another crime than you or I, who do not have records. And so this is one of my bipartisan endeavors with Representative Jordan Harris from Philadelphia. And he and I have teamed up, and we've made a really good partnership on not only the original clean slate, but then different bills that have come since then, because I truly believe that when you put something into place, it does need to take time to realize, hey, we need to clean this up a little bit here, here, and here. We're having an issue with the interpretation over here. We need to make sure that we're clear what this means and doing those types of things. So we've had bills since then. But that original clean slate bill, I think, really started the conversation for second chances and recognition that 2/3 of every person that goes to jail is coming back to our communities, whether they're going to our county jails or our state prisons. They're coming back to our communities, and we need to recognize that we don't want them to recidivate. We don't want that them to go back in. You can even look at it financially. It costs a lot of money to house somebody for a duration. Why not have them out there paying taxes, earning money, being back with their families, and doing what it is that we want every citizen to do? And so there are many out there that serve their time and have never had another interaction. And so the millions and millions of people that we have been able to assist, because basically the bottom line of the law is that it seals their record. So when you do a public search, the two biggest issues for those with records are jobs, securing a job, and securing housing. Those are the two leading reasons for recidivism. And they're also the two leading reasons for homelessness, failure, drug addictions, all of those, alcoholism, in the sense that if they are addicted and they can't find a job and they can't find it, when they get a good job, when they have a place to live, they can continue this process of being that good citizen that we want them to be. So having those records sealed, and there's a difference between sealing and expungement. So expungement means the record goes away entirely. We're talking about sealing the record. So if something should come up down the road, law enforcement still has access to that record. But if they are going to try for an apartment, they can say that their record is sealed, and they don't have to say that they have that on their record, a misdemeanor or a low-level felony. And we're dealing with non-violent crimes. We're not talking about rapists and murderers. We're talking about somebody who shoplifted at 18. We're talking about somebody who got a public intoxication offense when they were in college. We are talking about, so those types of things that, yes, did you make a mistake? Absolutely. Should you pay for it? Absolutely. There are ramifications to breaking the law. But 15 years later, should that really hold you back from getting a promotion? No. But in some cases it did. And so the ability to seal that record, I think, is a great start for that second chance.
Who was Corporal Jonathan Faircloth?
Oh, Corporal Faircloth. He was a constituent in the Mechanicsburg school district area, and he has family that lives in Upper Allen and Mechanicsburg Borough. And unfortunately, we lost him with a training exercise in Hawaii. They were doing a training exercise over there, and he was stationed there. And unfortunately, he died. And his family dealt with that death and dealt with, missing him. And I remember his dad talking to me about his son and how much of an impact he had, not only in Mechanicsburg football, but also when he decided to enlist and decided to serve his country. And they were very proud of him for that. And so we got talking, and, I've only named, you see a lot of times people name roads or name bridges, and this is the only one that I did in my time here. And it was really important to the family. And when we were coming up with, it's out on Route 15, and it's goes over 114. And those are two really important roads in the Upper Allen and the Mechanicsburg area. So I had suggested that that bridge, it's an overpass. It's not, certainly not talking about, the Golden Gate or anything like that. But this bridge is named after the Faircloth, Corporal Faircloth. And when I drive past it and I see the little, PennDOT sign, it makes me smile because his family was so proud of him. And, this area is heavily, as we talked about a little bit ago, but heavily military based. You can't go through Giant there in Fairview Township without seeing, a number of individuals in their Army fatigues. We have seen, or out on the Hamden, out on the Carlisle Pike, with the Mechanicsburg base. So veterans and veterans issues have always been very, very important to me. I'm very proud. I have 2 Army kids. Both my son and daughter are in the Army. And I'm not sure how I ended up with 2 Army kids, but veterans were always something that was very personal. My veterans event that I have every year is my very, very favorite event every year. It's awesome. We usually get about 250 veterans there to celebrate themselves, to celebrate their service and say thank you. And it's been a pretty neat event. It's always in the springtime, and it's coming up. So we're going to do it this year, April 23rd. So, but with the Faircloth family, I have the Mechanicsburg High School has a tribute to veterans every year. The Faircloth family was there one year, and I got to see them, walk across the field with them, paying honor to their son. And so it's pretty amazing, when you look around and you do see those posts. I would just say to people to remember that those people, that these bridges or this road or whatever it may be that you see as you're driving around, that the people behind them and how important that small sign is to that family is pretty amazing to watch. So it was a great ceremony that we were able to have when we unveiled it. And I always remember one of the individuals that served with Corporal Faircloth was at the ceremony. And afterwards, we were just standing around talking and getting ready to go see the actual sign be unveiled. And a young man walked up to me and he's like, "Representative Delozier, thank you so much for, doing this and getting this, to fruition and everything else." And I said, "Absolutely glad to do it." And he's like, "Well, I have a question for you." And I said, "Oh, okay, what?" And he's like, "Would you be upset if I burned some tire tracks across the bridge, right?" And I kind of looked at him and I was like, "No." I said, "The Upper Allen Police might have a problem with that." I said, and I kind of laughed. I said, "Why?" He goes, he loved car racing. And they would do it. They would be out there. So that was just something that burning a little rubber on that stretch of bridge to that young man was his tribute to Corporal Faircloth. And I had to laugh because I was like, okay, I said, but do not, if you get stopped, say I said to do it. And he laughed and he said, no. He goes, I just didn't want it to be taken as like that it was a bad, disrespectful of the, he goes, but because he loved to do that. He peeled out and he would leave that rubber on the road, and everything else. He goes, that was just kind of our thing. And I said, you pay tribute how you want to pay tribute.
That must have been one of the most beautiful burnouts you've ever seen in your life.
Of course. I never saw it. I have to say. But like I said, I was kind of terrified that he'd get caught and then he'd be like, Representative Delozier said I could do this. And I'd be like, oh, kid, don't do that to me, please. But yeah, it was kind of cool to hear him say that. But he was like tentative about it. He was asking permission because that's how he wanted to pay tribute.
What was the most rewarding day, maybe outside of that, what was the most rewarding day for you during your 18 years as a state representative?
Well, the first one that came to my mind legislatively were just getting bills signed. So I was kind of thinking about, when we got clean slate done, when I did Marcy's Law and it got through both and it was going to go to the ballot, like that to me was so exciting because it could help people, and I was kind of laughing because it's like, it sounds Pollyanna as to the fact of, but this job is about helping people. Like, I love nothing more than getting a phone call in and being able to make a phone call that somebody's frustrated. They can't get through the red tape, or they can't get somebody to answer the phone in an agency, which we get all the time. They cannot get someone on the phone. And so they call our office kind of as a last-ditch effort, or somebody said, oh, somebody told me to call your office that you could help, Great, let's see what we can do. Making that phone call over to the department through the legislative office and saying, look, this person is frustrated. This person can't get their kids medicine. This person can't get the service they need. They can't get a person on the phone. Can someone please give them a call back to get this straightened out? Those little things add up, so I can't put my finger on just one of those, but my brain went to certainly like when you see the governor sign a bill and you're like, yes, like all that work, we got it done, So certainly clean slate. We worked a long time on that. That took a lot of education, a lot of kind of, hand holding to bring it across the line. But it was near unanimous when it went through in each of the sessions and everything else. So that was pretty amazing. Being able to see that done, whether it was Marcy's Law, whether it was, clean slate, whether it was even some of the smaller bills that just had smaller implications, but they did affect somebody. So that, or else you wouldn't get it done, that type of thing. So I would have to say that. But I also, you have the memories of an individual who emailed me because they wanted the Capitol lit up for celiac disease. And she had celiac disease. And she's like, I need to educate people, Representative. It's a young girl. And I said, well, what do you need to educate them on? Well, I need to educate them on my disease and how important it is and how it affects people. Okay, talk to me about that, So we had the conversations and we went back and forth. And eventually that Capitol was lit up. And she stood in front of that Capitol and took a selfie. And she was so happy about that. And she got to talk about how it affected her life and how, but it was, if you really think about it, it was just lights. It was just lights. But it meant so much to her that her government listened. Yeah. That someone listened to her and thought that her thought was important. And not because she's 18 and could vote for you. She wasn't. Maybe 7 years later, she could, go to the voting booth or whatever the amount of years it would have been. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. Those pictures when you sit there and you go, okay, we made her happy that day. We listened to her. And sure, is that going to cure cancer or cure her disease? No, it's not. But to her, she advocated, someone listened, and she saw a result. And we can't always do that, unfortunately. Sometimes we can't get to that solution as hard as we try. So when you do have those wins, you remember them.
And I'm sure a lot of people will be very surprised to hear, I'm sure, how hard it is to get the Capitol lit up.
It's very hard.
Unbelievable.
Like I said, it's just lights, for goodness sake. But yes, it is hard. It's hard. But we were able to do it.
So what is, and I feel like I can ask you this maybe.
Uh-oh.
Now that you're not running for re-election,
Uh-oh.
are there any votes you regret making?
Oh, yes, there are. I regret, there was a bill that it was for firefighters. You're always going to support your firefighters. Mm-hmm. You want to support your firefighters. And the issue that I had with the bill, it basically dealt with the fact that if, 20 years later, someone comes back with cancer and they can attribute it to fire service, having fought fires, that township would then be paying health insurance for that individual. So you sit there and you say to yourself, you want your firefighters to be protected. You want that we need firefighters. We need all of our firefighters are volunteer. Mm-hmm. They're not even paid. Kind of thing. Some of our cities are paid, but most of our firefighters in the state of Pennsylvania are volunteer.
Vastly,
way over how many are paid. It's Philly, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh. Maybe some others up in Erie or something like that might have paid, but predominantly mm-hmm. they're volunteer. So that one always bothered me simply because I made the vote I made, and I think that they should be protected. So that outweighed my concerns. Mm-hmm. But I had concerns as to the fact of down the road, it was just kind of this unknown that these townships were then going to have to deal with. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's good policy to pass a law that puts municipalities on the hook for the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that was a good balance. But you're not going to vote against your firefighters. And so I supported my firefighters. And I don't regret supporting my firefighters. What I regret is that we couldn't come up with a bill that supported our firefighters, but also gave a tangible to those local municipalities as to what did this bill mean financially for our taxpayers down the road. From that bill, there ended up being a number of other issues that came up with insurance because of that unknown for those municipalities. And it ended up being a lot bigger hurdle for our municipalities than we even thought when we were passing the bill. So that may have changed a little bit of the dialogue if we had known the amount of hurdles it was going to throw in the way of our municipalities. And so they're still kind of dealing with that as well. So I regret that could not be worked out better with more finality in the sense of what that was going to cost.
Outside of votes, is there anything, if you had to relive this entire experience, is there anything outside of votes that you made mm-hmm. that you would change, do differently?
I don't think so.
No? That's a good way to...
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, look, was it all easy? Absolutely not. Were my elections easy? Absolutely not. Were they hard to take when, 3 months of TV ads come at you, telling you you're a horrible person? Yeah, I could have done without that, Could I have been done without, being yelled at over, called every name, threatened? When I had a town hall that they were going to come down and shoot me, that was a little terrifying. So, thank you, Mechanicsburg Police. They stood around, to make sure that person didn't come. But that's terrifying when you have those types of things. Would I have, I always laugh because my kids were pretty young when I started, and, my kids' faces were in the mailbox every other year. One of the jokes we heard when my son was pretty young, and we did a family shot and mailed it out, and everything else on the mailer. And one of his buddies from school was saying to his mom, like, "Why is Ben in my mailbox?" and he just didn't understand why Ben was in his mailbox, And Ben was like, "I'm in his mailbox. Why, Mom? Don't put my face in his mailbox." So you know, the only thing that in order to that balance, that life work balance, you know, making sure my kids, you know, I was there when my kids needed me and everything else. And I couldn't have done this without their support and, you know, my family's support, you know, my mom, my sister, my husband, you know, my in-laws, you know, my father-in-law was my sign guru. You know, he would be out there sticking signs in the yards or in the, you know, right-of-ways and everything else. And my mother-in-law did doors with me, you know, on a regular basis. And, you know, my husband and kids were, you know, always, you know, putting signs together and making, you know, that type of thing. So you can't do this job without support from your friends and family.
Well, I would like to congratulate you on a very successful 18 years in service.
Thank you.
And with that being said, though, I'm still going to yell at you for leaving us every time I see you.
Well, I understand it. I understand. And look, I've got 11 months more. I'm not going to be sitting on the couch doing nothing about it. I still have, actually, when I called Jordan, I called him a little bit before I made the announcement just to give him a heads up, because as I mentioned, you know, we're friends as well as colleagues. And I said, okay, I'm calling my friend, you know, Jordan. And he goes, yeah. And I told him, and he's like, oh my God, no, that's not, you know. So he's like, no, he goes, I understand. He goes, you know, I get it. And he's like, well, all right, we still have 11 months to do one thing, make you go out with a bang. We're going to find something, you know. So it's not going to be just, you know, coasting along or anything like that. It's the job's still really, really important to me. And it's one that I enjoy doing. So.
Representative Sheryl Delozier, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.